So the idea of this presentation is to apply the settler colonial theory that Palestinians have been knowing for decades, but internationals have learned since recently, to a Palestinian city, in 48 Palestine, and both to complement it with indigenous Palestinian studies. The idea is not just to explain what has happened in Haifa since the Nakba. We've already listened what happened before the Nakba and what was the immediate effect of the Nakba, but just also what's happening today in terms of settler colonialism, and also try to stress and put emphasis on Palestinian agency and how Palestinians are resisting in Haifa. Methodology-wise, the idea is I've read lots and lots and lots. I've read people who are sitting here. And I've also done qualitative interviews and observation. I made lots of observation. That has given me an excuse to hang out in cafes in Haifa, which is always a luxury. So the first pillar of my presentation is this idea that Haifa is a settler colonial city. We've already been through the beginnings, how Haifa was a really Palestinian capital before 1948, before the Nakba, in all but the political sense, in terms of the economy, commerce, culture. It was also a true mixed city, even though now the term has been misused and keeps being misused by Israeli scholars, but it was in terms of population. And so the Nakba led, as Dr. Manat told us yesterday, to the expulsion, to the ghettoization, although I know there's a controversy about the name, but we can call it whatever we want. But this idea that all of the Palestinians that were not expulsed were confined to Wadi Nisnas. And this also idea that not just special expulsion and ghettoization, but also symbolic erasure. And as Dr. Mana said yesterday, this idea of the absence of a Palestinian city, of what was really a Palestinian city. Ever since then, the Israeli state put in place lots of policies of space production in terms of what is called Judaization policies of segregation along ethnic and racial lines. This idea that Palestinians were enclaved in different neighborhoods, whether it's Nas and afterwards others like Khalisa, completely segregated from the Jewish Israeli residents. But segregation was not just spatial, it was also economic, it was also in terms of education, it was also in terms of legal and crime. For example, in Khalisa, you can see how the police completely neglects it and has allowed all of the drunk gangs to dominate the neighborhood. And again, it's still a symbolic dispossession. And with that continuous denial of Palestinian, that's much better, Palestinian identity and possibilities of expression that takes place both at the local and Haifa and at the national level. Then we have the effects of neoliberalism in what has been called neoliberal apartheid and many other names, with the demolition and renovation of Palestinian houses, for example, again in Wadi Nisnas, that Palestinians cannot afford, and it's Jewish Israelis who are buying these ancient Palestinian houses. And this idea that the neoliberalism has also allowed for the fragmentation, for further fragmentation amongst Palestinians. For some Palestinians have moved, thanks to or by virtue of the free market policies, to faraway neighborhoods, like, for example, Wadi Jamal. And then we have this false myth of the city of coexistence, this idea of bounded assimilation. Especially since the 90s, the city of Haifa was one of the many examples in which Israel and Israelis utilized the mantra of liberal civic equality, whereas trying to hide what has always been and still is settler colonial citizenship. But what struck me, what's really interesting after all of my readings and interviews, is how Haifa has become a kind of exception in terms that even though settler colonial policies still take place, they do so less overtly, less aggressively, in order to maintain this narrative of coexistence, this narrative of liberal city, and they allow for a certain degree of Palestinian agency. And this is how. Sorry. And so this is how this certain degree of Palestinian agency has allowed for the creation of corporeal and sorry, I'm not used to that. Corporeal and not corporeal new urban reserves as new sites of Palestinian resistance. Palestinian resistance has always existed in Haifa, in terms of Sumud and the daily practices of resistance by Palestinians all around historic Palestine. But as of lately, during the last decades, especially now, it has been more overt and more assertive. The idea is, that Palestinians have been using, for example, this idea of coexistence to their advantage, reclaiming the right to have rights and the right to the city and the right to have a true public sphere. I differentiate between different various kinds of resistance that are overlapping, that are interplayed amongst each other, that nurture each other, and that are both corporeal and not corporeal. First, I speak about institutional. Hey, this is much better. First, I speak about what I call institutional resistance and this idea of NGOization since the 80s, and thanks to the global heyday of civil society all around the world, and also thanks to a change in the Israeli laws for civil society organizations. Many civil society organizations were created. Their main aim at the beginning was to provide basic services to Palestinian neighborhoods. For example, again, Wadi Nisnas and Khalista, this is the example of the Social Development Committee of Haifa. But progressively, they didn't deny themselves just to provide services and denounce municipal actions, but also to empower. I don't like the word empower, but I still haven't found a much better word. So they also try to empower Palestinians as Palestinians in Haifa. When I speak about institutional resistance and NGOs, I also have to speak about political parties, even though this is a topic for another research. And in most of my interviews, many people were speaking about this idea of factionalism amongst 48 Palestinians, represented by these different interpretations of what Palestinians, or 48 Palestinians, should advance towards, between, for example, Jabha, Tajamu, or the Islamic movement. And these debates were also taking place even in protest and manifestation, popular protest in Haifa. This debate, this factionalism and this debate that is taking place nowadays amongst the 48 Palestinians, according to most of my interviews, is also the subject of an intergenerational debate. I'm super nervous, sorry. Both in NGOs, both in parties, and both in the Haifawi society as a whole. I also speak about topographical resistance, this idea that Palestinian residents of Haifa have been reclaiming space and the right to habitat and housing, according to Joseph Jabarin. They've recreated their internal frontiers. They didn't resort to informal practices, but for example, they resorted to the free market policies to buy houses and stretch the neighborhoods, the borders of the neighborhoods, for example, in Kiryat Elizar or in the German colony, and they've created what Jeff Tatchell called gray spaces. I also believe there's topographical resistance in terms of architecture, but when it comes to the restoration of the House of Grace, the renovation and the purchase of and renovation of of Palestinian houses in Wadi Nisnas and other neighborhoods. And also, according to some of my interviews, this idea of topographical or geographical resistance can also be seen in the idea that Palestinians can buy a house and can move to any kind of neighborhood, even if it's a Jewish neighborhood, because these admission committees are not that strong in Haifa, as they are not that active as they are in other neighborhoods. One of the main points of Palestinian resistance nowadays in Haifa is this idea of cultural resistance, both when it comes to culture with a capital C, this idea of arts, music, and culture with a, not a capital, when it comes to being a Palestinian in terms of memory, history, and education, there's not a distinction anymore between high and low culture. And there's not a distinction anymore between official and non-official cultural activities and cultural speeches. Many people were speaking about new spaces for public discourse and socialization. They spoke about cafes, restaurants, about theaters, about festivals. But the debate was there, as it was about, for example, this alternative scene, concerts, and whether those new alternative scenes could reach to other 48 Palestinians or even 40 Palestinians across the Green Line or even the diaspora. This resistance in Haifa is also intersectional. In order to struggle against the binary essentialized identities, this idea that Palestinians have to be urban, not urban, classic, not classic, backwards or advanced, and especially regarding a more modern discourse when it comes to women, when it comes to LGBTQ. And many also of my interviews spoke of a double critique against both this idea that Israelis had to essentialize them and put them in boxes, but also the Palestinians, the Palestinian society inside the Green Line also had this idea that had also an immobile image of what Palestinians should be in their societies. And last, I also speak about this idea of patriotism, of a more national resistance. Palestinians have been Palestinians since before the Nakba, but nowadays the third post-Nakba generation is more assertive when it comes to their Palestinianness. They are also completely aware of what they call the hybrid identities, which they are not ready to negotiate, but they are more proud of after years and decades of being called traitors by some other Palestinians, for example, in '67. And they are more ready of denouncing this contradiction of liberal structural colonization, this idea that Israel is never going to be a state for all of its citizens, and as opposed to their fathers or to their grandfathers, most of the youth I spoke with, they say we are not going to waste time trying to convince the Israelis that we belong with them and that we are going to become equal citizens, but now we are completely aware that we are Palestinians and we are going to fight alongside Palestinians in '67, alongside Palestinians in the diaspora. And we are also going to fight, and this is something that for me, at least I see it as a wonderful idea, this idea that we are also going to fight alongside other dispossessed communities all around the world. So for me, I don't have a conclusion just because I think it's still a debate that is going to take place for many years and even decades, but I opened that discussion at the end of the article in which I stress this idea that Palestinians in Haifa are in a constant negotiation within the red lines, but these red lines, both in terms of corporeal and not corporeal, of physical and psychological, are blurrier at least from what I've seen, than anywhere else are in 48 or in 67. This idea of living-death coexistence, I've asked just in case, and nobody believes that. There are not what Homi Bhabha called third spaces. There's not real reflexivity and not even this idea of coexistence. If there's cooperation along some lines, for example, in feminist issues or LGBTQ issues, it's very limited and it's only a pragmatic cooperation. That's a testament to the dynamic structuralism of settler colonialism, this idea that settler colonialism continues to advance and is flexible enough to adapt to anything, hopefully not, but to all the conditions it's developed in. That runs the risk of considering all of these acts of resistance I spoke about petty acts of resistance just because they are fighting against structuralism. But I try to be optimistic at the end of my paper and try to stress that these urban reserves, these sites of resistance, can show the way, can lead the way to a decolonized future. The structure of this decolonized future has not been devised, or there are still debates about these 1 state, 2 states, 1.5 states. I don't know. But these new generations, especially the ones I spoke with, they are articulate, they are prepared, they are brilliant, and they already know what they are fighting against. And because they believe, or most of the persons I spoke with, they believe that the situation is not ideal to dismantle such a colonial structure. They believe they are laying the groundwork for recreating the Palestinian people and restate the conditions for their future, the future of the whole of the Palestinian people. And this, I didn't include that, but all of these youths I spoke with, they wanted to build a better future for Palestinians, but their main worry was not settler colonialism, but as you all know, was the fragmentation, not just within 48, but the fragmentation amongst all of the Palestinian people.
At Birzeit University, Salim. He's a candidate and he's a lecturer at Birzeit University. He received his first degree in civil engineering and his master's degree is in urban planning and design from Birzeit University. His research interests are focused on spatial inequality, the tale of 2 cities, Ramallah and El-Bira. Thank you very much. My paper is about the tale of 2 cities and stories from Ramallah and El-Bira. I must please say that this is my doctoral thesis, which discusses the geopolicy of the space and the making of the space in the Palestinian context. And I would like to thank to all who have my supervisor, Dr. Liza Taraki, and Dr. Salim Tamari, who gave me this insinuation of this, the title of my paper. My paper is mainly focuses on comparatives, ethnographic comparatives, to address many of the resources, the preliminary resources that address the tale or the legend of making the 2 cities, if I may say this. And allow me to read some of what I've written in this paper just to commit to time. And the sociology of the differences and why Ramallah and why El-Bira in a scenery that is mixed, that would take the narratives of Ramallah and its fears and sacred its name on El-Bira. Friends in 19th of April 2020 for the 150th centenary of its presence and by the presence of the mayor of El-Bira, who graduated graduated from Birzeit. The Palestinian students sang the anthem of their national anthem and performing their names in the school in English letters, and then they dance on the song of Wena Ramallah, where one of the seniors said that he felt very embarrassed because they were in the presence of the mayor of El Bira, and some said that this intensive connection between Ramallah and El Bira as twins, that they're connected together geographically. However, they are two administratively separated units, and the Palestinian Bureau of Statistics, the highest rank in the Palestinian division hierarchy, and the center of Ramallah and Bira governorate, and everybody can ask and work in Ramallah. Anyone in Ramallah can distinguish between the Ramallah and El Bira from the differences in between them, and the competitive relationship between them, and the disparities between the two cities, whether on the discourse, on the practices, on the behaviors in the urban daily life, or to be able to attract the commercial activities. And he needs Ramallah has had its fortune and its and it has addressed many issues as the nature of the discourse and the perspectives of the doctrine and of the people and their behaviors in under this neoliberal colonialism. Ramallah and El Bira was regarded as one unit, and they thought that there is no social boundaries among them, but it means that the disputes in general has neglected El Bira and could not find justification why Ramallah was the focus, and there was no comparative studies accordingly. And due to this context, I see that one important thing is how the social and economic morphology to Ramallah El Bira was formed. That was next to the centralization that was established in Ramallah based on the PNA's presence. In an analytical study, I see from the empirically that touches most lives of people, which gives a deep and abstract study of the place, and which does not permit to use the individual as a neoliberal mechanism that would contribute in the formation of the urban cohesion. And of course, this is related to the governance and the urban space, and using the funds that are able to attract the investors. Many regard that the PNA's presence in 1994 that is something very vital and important, of utmost importance in the formation of the urbanization of the place and its relation to of 1967 and 1948. And it's not by coincidence that Ramallah was the center, a main center and stable for the PNA's agencies. There's also, it's a network, complex network that have governed the reputation of the city, and it kept on accumulating until it led us to where we are now. The characteristics, the social characteristics and social and economic characteristics of Ramallah since the start of the 20th century was the pillar of its formation. El Bira was marginalized even during the British mandate. Ramallah was, the name of Ramallah was highlighted during the PNA's, and it was even discussed as an alternative capital, which enhanced its centrality. And the last mayor in the Jordanian era believed that all the occupational eras had tried to increase this dispute between the two cities, and that's why always the occupying force gave Ramallah a bigger name, and some of the Fatah faction objected and asked that El Bira should be, the name of Bira should be annexed when Ramallah's name is used. And it seems that the competitiveness of Ramallah would market and would help in marketing different spheres in as being a unique space. So these elite people are living in Ramallah, and they have this repute that El Bire does not have. It looks like it's it adds to the mix in the identity of both cities. One officer in Al Bira municipality said that using the name of Ramallah is been a problem forever. And even the residents and citizens of Al Bira used to refer to the name of Ramallah as if Ramallah is add 5-star hotels, just like Palestine Tower, which is located in Al Bira, but it's because it provides alcohol drinks, although alcohol serving is banned by the municipality of El Bira. Ramallah has never have formed a coherent society, but the PNA has established a new era in these eco-social morphologies and led to a new complexion between that arose between them and other cities, and that has was reflected on the nature of institutions that were formed in the city and the dynamics of life and the daily practices. The crystallizing of certain characteristics, mental characteristics related to each of these cities. While Taraki and Jakaman are regarding these patterns as bold and universal, we cannot. They are in return as conventional in El Bira. So these disparities have increased these jolly boundaries between both cities, adding to the competitiveness between them. It seems that the different social background and the pre-mental image for Ramallah has paved a fertile soil to those returnees who had started forming new types of livelihoods, and where an army of immigrants came from outside the West Bank and had added to the scenery, the cultural, social, and economic scenery of the city. The fieldwork research reiterates that it's not easy as a stranger to be involved wholly in the traditions of El Bira, and it has its consequences that are different from Ramallah. You can notice that there are non-Bira people in Balou and Satih Marhaba, whereas they are not easily welcomed in a Nadif neighborhood. And what's noticeable is that the refugees in Bira are mostly residing in Al-Amari camp, whereas they're not easily accepted in Ramallah, which misses having its original residence in it. On the other hand, there is this claim that points out that El Bira does not welcome any stranger or any foreigner, and that they reject any foreign. Despite that, some of them admit that yes, it is there, but some of them say that it is diminishing. And the scene that is still strong is that they feel that the city does not welcome them after being there on decades. And in this regard, I think that the Bira discriminatory manner is complex and has historic dimensions, which goes back that some of the Bira individuals who lived during the Nakba, they were refugees and they weren't accepted in the educational cycle, and that they felt the discrimination from other foreign countries, and where the lifestyle of El Bira wasn't good enough. And also the political goal for the displacement of indigenous people of El Bira in order. One of the ladies of Bira said that her teacher told her at school, if you have a piece of land, go and plant your land and leave your chair for others. But he said, He did not. He said, I did. I studied, and I become someone recognizable. But and they were about to take this opportunity from me. During the festivities, you see differences. Since 2015, you will see a Christmas tree and the Ramadan lamp in its center. However, in Elbira, only from 2018, it started to light something, it's a lamp for the crescent of Ramadan. And it's not as luxurious as the Ramallah is, and even some of them do not really acknowledge it. Ramallah has all cultural and recreational activities and different and mixed attendance from both sexes, which Elbira misses, and where one of its mayors said that he was very keen to watch over the type of festivities that they had to do, and he had to bring in religious choirs, whereas in Ramallah there were dancing parties without any problems. The streets of Ramallah in Ramadan opens until the wee hours of the morning, whereas in which is not found in Elbira except on the 27th night of Ramadan, which is linked to the Al-Qadr night. So it is just a religious occasion, and it's away from the eco-social festivities. And these reflect the culture, the religious conviction in Elbira that is much more than it is in Ramallah. And maybe also the nature of the economic activities that the city incubates. In the absence of accurate statistics about the number of the census of Elbira people, they're less than 10% according to the estimations of people, and I don't think that the people who does this demon and add to the pluralism of Ramallah, it seems that they weren't not based on documented studies, and it was maybe based on they were biased to certain attitudes. The truth is different. Elbira incubates Al-Amari camp, which is one of the biggest refugees in the governorate, and it has a number of refugees that is much better than bigger than in Ramallah according to 2017's census. And also there's also this relationship of kinship between them and the newcomers, and the societies and charity societies and community colleges and hospitals. And here I need to address three different institutions when we talk about Elbira. The municipality and what's related to it in attitudes that would sacred sectoral interests. Also, it's library, which is the biggest and the most variant in the area, and then the city as itself as a geographical and social and economic matrix, which their behavior is an integrated classical model of the Palestinians, which now seems to be between the is ranking between the modern and the old, and in fighting so that not to become a minority in their own city as Ramallah is. أسرع من هيك. Concerning using the pieces of land, we can say that in general, the major part of using the pieces of land is for residential purposes. 72% of the lands in Elbira is like, in comparison, it's 36% in Ramallah. And it seems that the elite housing in Ramallah, like 74%, and 214, which is 4% to 18%. In Ramallah, its roads are open to 19%, but in Elbira, it's 8%. and in this regard, we see that it's double the area in Ramallah, in El-Bira, than it is in El-Bira than in Ramallah. So 3% in El-Bira, 1% in Ramallah. According to the Oslo Accord divisions, and as we see in the map here, we see that the area A that's supposed to be under the Palestinian jurisdiction is 59.6% from the aggregate number of lands, and 34%. This forms 34% of El-Bira lands. As for area B, where it's 20% for Ramallah and 5.10 to El-Bira percent. As for area C, it's 59.8% from El-Bira lands. Although this area is it's an estimated area or approximate, but they would guide the Ramallah area C, Ramallah 5.8, 34, 20% B, and the last, so it's less than 20% area C in El-Bira. 20 in Ramallah, 20.3 C, so it's 3 times more. And despite that, 1/5 of Ramallah lands are within Area C, but the city has expanded towards the west, and Bira cannot expand east, and Betunia cannot is on its southern borders. And lands in Ramallah that are Area C, which is under the Israeli security jurisdiction, it gave the chance for the city to expand. The municipalities have the right to expand, which wasn't really, which could not be done in El-Bira because it maintained its boundaries according to the Oslo Accord, and that's why it's not able to practice its sovereignty. The space in Ramallah forms 84% of the total pieces of lands, or the area of lands, whereas its land in Bira is 10,600 dunams, which is only 47% of the aggregate number of its lands. And what really contributes more in the limitness of expansion of El-Bira in comparison to Ramallah is that its expansion is controlled by two of the biggest settlements in the east and south, Sagot and Beit El, and it also so accordingly it forces it to stick to its current boundaries. So this is the populated area, and Ramallah the density of population is much less. And so this explains that most lands of El-Bira are in Area C, and this explains why there is no much land and property sales in comparison to Ramallah. And although it's starting to pick up gradually after the Palestinian authorities' presence, and it looks that the traditions and the shame or the stigma of selling the lands has started to evaporate, and now there's this controversial thing that some of the immigrants of Bira started to come back and to sell the lands that they have inherited from their ancestors and to transfer the money accordingly abroad. Finally, it seems that Ramallah, that following Beirut's path and other cities, is working towards globalization. It has learned how to live, how to accept life, and how to enjoy life. And they became a marked assertion in its views, although other cities are still practicing the life under of occupation, the globalized restaurants, and the trend in the city is an interpretation how the city is being enforced into the cycle of capitalization, and Albira does not have all this, and it's limited to certain areas. In 2018, on the 13th of December 2018, we could not find a proper place to do the birthday, to run the birthday for my son. We could not find a suitable place in the city, not because we did not know where to go to these scarce places, but because of a rumor that we heard that Ramallah and Beira would be invaded by the Israelis that night. So, and lots of cars were rushing through the southern entrance of Beira, and people were speeding up and running to the supermarkets and buying groceries, and Beira became a ghost city in one day, and I felt so bad. So I thought in front of Ramallah. So I thought of Al-Bahri restaurant in Ramallah that takes in everybody in, and Al-Bira slept early while Ramallah was still vibrant. Thank you very much. Thank you, Salim. Thank you. I was concerned that Ramallah and Beira would start picking up on each other, but thank God nobody did anything of the sort so far. And now we'll have the final speech in this session. Is Jack Barzakhian is the head of Al-Ma'mal. Birzeit is honored to be hosting his exhibition that you might visit today or later on. Thank you very much. I'm honored to be with you today, and in addition to the exhibition that was mentioned by Ghada, it's also لا منيح. You're fine. So in addition to the exhibition that's here, that's hosted by Birzeit University and the museum, I'm honored that you visited. And there's also a new publication, the Jerusalem Court, about the number 77. This is the work I'm gonna talk about. That's why I will not read. I will not have to read. And although I've written everything, and maybe we'd like take around in these photographic pictures. It's my this is my work. I tried to start with the pictures. I wanted to work with the pictures as a resource of the knowledge of the information, and to understand the past and the history, and specifically I'm talking about the history of Jerusalem through to check the details of the pictures and to understand the changes through comparing them with recent pictures. So I visited the locations of the old pictures, and I took new pictures and started comparing. And this idea, this methodology stemmed how archaeologists work. They study the history through the layers, and theoretically I consider that the old picture is a layer of time, like 100 years ago. And what I'm doing today is I'm going to create the modern layer that we're living in today, and to reveal the old layer of about 10 years ago, 100 years ago, and what happened, who did this change, and why, and what was the motivation, why these changes happened. I started with a very famous picture, and I noticed now that there are two books that were published by the Institute of Palestine for Palestine Studies. They were on the cover of these books. This is very close to me. I was born in the Newgate area, and I was born and raised there. So when I started with my project, I started with this picture. And because I'm due to my work, I work in the arts field, so I know that caring about a picture from the information, the knowledge of it, it focuses. We need to think of the focus of the picture. So it seems like the focus was on the demonstration that happened in 1933 in the Newgate. There were demonstrations in Jaffa and in Jerusalem. So the focus was on the demonstration, and we see that there's a corpse on the floor. We see lots of shoes here and there. But I started to check the outside this point, and if you notice the buildings on the left and on the right, the building on the left, I did not live there, but I remember my mother used to talk about it. It's the building of the reparatrices nuns, and it looked like in 1933 it was in good shape. And so when we check the modern picture of today, this picture I took recently, we see that these buildings have gone. So the question now, and going back to Dr. Abdel Hafiz about the new plans and master plans, about what happened surrounding the old city, I started to dig for reasons. And I checked a big number of pictures and to find out what the story behind these buildings. They were there, they're demolished now, they're gone. This is the same area. So I checked the master plans, and one of the main points that pointed out, and that was really prominent, is the green belt or zone or gardens, as you mentioned, around the city. And I liked the discussion between you and Dr. Salim, that they said that they thought of conducting or having an area, an open area around the old city, just to show it, as to highlight it, or to it's an old city, so there shouldn't be any modern or any new buildings that would hide its beauty. So we see that there's this area or the zone around the city, and here I would like to show you, and I will also talk about the Mount of Olives and why is it left up till now vacant. At least I read that there's a point of view, or there is some explanation why is it still empty. So they decided that these buildings are ugly and they obstruct the scenery, and so Ghada set the second master plan, and it was very instrumental. And he was an Ashby with the general stores, the military governor of the city. They used to do the planning and the implementation, and they formed the committee of the lovers of Jerusalem. But it was like more of its model only. Ashby would tell them about it. It is to represent the sectarial division, or that they projected over the city. So they brought in the Mufti and the Patriarch from the Orthodox Patriarch and the Armenian Patriarch as representatives of Jerusalem people, and some other figures, dignitaries, Musa Qazim, and a number of Jews. But but they were the ones who worked on this prospect, and they started implementing these ideas. And so we hear that this is Jaffa Gate area. This is the a bridge that's connecting Mamilla and Jaffa Gate, but this is the same place in when General Allen became in on December 11th, 2017. We see that there are buildings on both sides of this road, which is the start of Jaffa Road, which also on its left you can go to Mamilla Road, and now this is the road with the tunnel. Ashby was also mentioned today. Ashby didn't like the idea of having the red tiles, and he wished that the outer facade of the buildings so it showed that these buildings with the red tile roof tiles, they were Ashby's drawings and designs. It seems that he reverted back to having a dome and a vault, and he wanted, he preferred that that would be the design of the buildings. And everybody mentioned the clock tower, and you know the story of the clock tower, and there's a methodology about mythology between the Palestinians, and that I've heard many times, and this is my point of view, but maybe you think it's not accurate, or this is personal, but at the end, everybody says that aliyat, that the mechanism of the the mechanism of this clock was taken to be used in Big Ben, but I personally say this is not correct. Ashby's people, even the committee of Jerusalem lovers objected, but in the memories of Wasef Johariya, he agrees with Ashby, and he says that this does not really, it's not in line with the typology of architecture. So it was moved to the new gate. This is a picture of the new gate that was placed in that area. It was called Almadbouh Square, but then this picture was taken by John D. Whiting, and he wrote down that I took this picture as a request from Ashby. And if we look at the details, we see that they're demolishing it. So it did not, it just stayed there for only 2 years, but then it was completely taken out and wiped out from the New Gate Square, which looks like this now. This is a beautiful picture that I've seen several times in postings on Facebook, and the Jaffa Gate. And if we remember that there's a fast hotel, which is now, it's called Dan Pearl. And if we look towards Jaffa Gate, we can see the buildings on both sides, and we can notice that one of the main studios there, one of the most important studios, where there's a person who is his thing, then he's Krikorian, and next to him was the studio of Khalil Rad. And now this is the picture of today from the same angle. This picture, this is an overview. And if we compare them together, we see that the road is still the same where it was previously. It's the same location. That's the old one. This is the new one. Same contour, same going up towards Jaffa Gate. But if we look upwards and we check that, we see that all these buildings that were in the old picture have gone. These pictures were taken directly after 1967, and this is the same location where if we check the center of the picture, we see that there's something in the middle, in the center of the street, and there is something like a circular shape. And if we really focus, we see that it is still there. The same circular monument is still there. But this is how it looks like now. This is the segregation wall. Or no, this is the wall that is now, it's called the no man's land between East Jerusalem and West Jerusalem. So this picture was taken by someone who was in West Jerusalem in 1967, and he took the picture part of the wall, and we see now there's the repertories building, the nuns building or convent. Part of it is down, but some of it is still up. This is after they removed the wall that separated this no man's land. So my question is about what's a no man's land. One of the questions, how can this is one of the most important areas in Jerusalem after Jerusalem was open to outside the walls. We all know that Jerusalem was previously limited by its walls. For long times, it was confined by the walls until the mid-19th century. And but from the start of the 19th century, as the doctor said, there was Karmel Khalili, who built a building or a resort building for the Sheikh. But then the other foreign missionaries started building, and then people started building outside the walls. But the heart of the commercial life that was before leaving out the old Jerusalem was the Christians' quarters, which was the commercial commercial heart of Jerusalem. But it gradually moved. And due to different factors, it was moved to Jaffa Gate area, and this is due to different reasons. Because Jaffa Gate was the gate that used to where foreigners used to go to the cities. The biggest number of were pilgrims, and they used to come through Haifa port, Jaffa Road port, and they would go into the city through the Jaffa Gate. And if we read from some of the visitors in the 19th mid-century, we noticed that the Jaffa Gate was opened for more hours than the other gates, but they would wait for more half an hour, and then they would close the Jaffa Gate to give chance for other people to come in. And afterwards, after this commercial activities started, they started building and they started opening the gates. And what supported all this movement, and that this is now something that we don't see now, is the train railway. When the railway station was established in 1891 in the hill opposite Jaffa Gate, then a bigger number of visitors started coming in through the train, so it became like the heart of the most vibrant area. So my question is, how can during this peace time, and when they drew this green line that was designed by Dayan and the blue line by Tal, so this no man land, how could it be? How was it demolished? How did they give the permission for it to be demolished? This is one of the questions that are still there. My research has many questions with no answers, because I cannot read. I don't have the answers for them, but I can say that the pictures are what made me visit these areas and to think deeply on all these rhetorical questions. This is one of the buildings that was built outside Jaffa Gate when it started opening up. When the building started to be built outside the walls. So so this took a while. This is in 1888, and this is the last picture for the festivities. For the sultan's accession, and this is the building, the old building. It's Hotel Fast. This is it now. This is now Dan Pearl. That was this picture was. This is to be noted. This is the Nazis' flag is on the. That was taken in 1937 before Hitler started his famous campaign. So Nazis party was comparatively accepted, and so that was their headquarters, the headquarters of the German state, and this is how it was. This building is to be now demolished next to the Dan Pearl. I asked a lot about this picture that's still there. It's for the Sepulchre Church. And there was a slogan. Someone wrote down that it's out of bound, but through the memories of Johariya, I see that when the British came in, they wanted just to do just like what happened in the Holy Mosque, that non-Muslims were not allowed to get into when they can. Why are we opening these churches to non-Christian? And so they put this sign, and they've put or they assigned Italian soldiers to guard it. This is when they demolished the wall that used to separate the West Jerusalem from East Jerusalem in the no man's land. This is the plan of Mamilla, the master plan of Mamilla, or the blueprints of Mamilla that was set in the 70s, the start of the 70s. This area that was mentioned a few times, it's the Mount Olive Tree Mountain, and according, I think that in order, because I'm running out of time. According to the Christian and Hebrew religion, that the awaited Jesus is supposed to come from that area, supposed to come from behind that mountain and come to the golden door where people would be queuing, waiting for him. That's why we read that the American colony people, when they first came to Palestine, they stayed there. They stayed in the valleys of as if they were sitting at first row seats waiting for Jesus to come. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Jack, and thanks for abiding by the time. We started a bit late, but we need to finish on time. I have some quick questions to the speakers. After that, we will give the chance for Q&A. My question to Atasho, I hope I said your name correctly. It would have been nice to listen to what you said after listening to the second half of Himmat. It would have been ذكرتي أو قلتي بأن ليس هناك تفرقة في حيفا بين القانون والثقافة أو الطبقة العليا، لأنه فيك ورقتك تحدثتي عن المقاومة، ولكن
elite activism, kind of. Like, I didn't feel the people of Haifa in your paper. When you talked, I could see that you're talking about the people of Haifa, but the emphasis of the paper was not about that. So I was wondering if you think that the resistance in Haifa is unique because of this mixture between low and high culture, and what does that mean even? Like, what does that mean that there's no distinction between low and high culture? And also, I wasn't sure, like, why Haifa, even though we all like Haifa, and I think there is resistance that is unique, but how is it unique than other cities? That wasn't clear in the paper. سليم تبع المشاكل. سليم
Salim,
حكيت إشي في الورقة
in your paper, of course, thanks a lot for your great efforts and the efforts of the three speakers. Salim, you said that you tried to, that there were attempts to increase the divisions between people. When you were reading your paper, it seemed like there was some fighting going on between the people. So if that fighting was taking place, then why were there some parties that wanted to exacerbate and widen the differences, including in Bethlehem? It's kind of like Bethlehem, Beit Sahur. So why is this division between the two cities, Ramallah and Bire, different from other places? I live in the Bethlehem area, and I know some feuds or disagreements between Bethlehem, Beit Sahur, and Beit Jala. So a tale of two cities. Salim, I feel like even though you didn't say it, it seemed like you were talking about two municipalities. Now the role of institutions here is that I cannot say how it was historically because I do not know how it was, but now I know that there is current competition, competing agenda and competing ideologies. These stories do not come by coincidence. And why do we need to defend Al-Bire particularly? Maybe we should have understood why they chose this different characteristic. I didn't say that you are defending. This is actually interesting for all of us. And thanks to the occupation, we made us all localized. We became Ramallah, Bire, different localities. Another very important point about the maps is the sea areas, which shows that more than 50% of Al-Bire is areas C, which means that it is a city which will not see wide urbanization and growth. More than half of it is sea areas. Therefore, there is no chance for it to expand. Assuming Ramallah is really expanding. I will stick to what I said with regard to Salim. Jack, I love art and I really enjoyed your presentation. It was as enjoyable and pleasant as the other lectures. By the way, I wasn't looking at the images, but I was envisioning them. Just to link the two lectures here together on the idea that Haifa is a unique site. Do you think that Jerusalem is a unique site of Palestinian resistance? Like Haifa, unique site of Palestinians. Do you think that we can use these images as an idea to show the erasing of the urban space and the identity that we have? So do you think that if we do 3D, 3-dimension, which is resistance, can we do that? Add that as a third dimension, whether academically or artistically, to have it more integrated. And that's my final comment to your question too. Maybe you can take 2 minutes to answer, then we take other. No, okay, we'll take all questions here. Okay, you want to speak? Okay, please go ahead, Mr. Salim. I can't hear him. He's not using the microphone. Three wonderful lectures. Quick comments or questions. One to Salim and one to Jack Persakian. The question is specific. In Ramallah and Al-Bir, there is an election formula. In Ramallah especially, this formula was taken from the Lebanese parliamentary protocol, and it emerged during the British Mandate era. And currently, they are suffering from the same problem that Lebanon is suffering from. Question: do you think that this formula has solved the denominational, social, and class problems in Ramallah, which can be like a model for Al-Bira? Or is it the fact that the ambiguity in Al-Bira does not help a lot in solving disputes because they do not specify any percentages for different parties? What do you think about this formula of having divided or distributed representation in Bira, like as is the case in Ramallah? I enjoyed the lecture of Jack Persekian, and you made me raise. I used to have many questions. You answered a lot of them, but some of them remain unanswered. With regard to the Nazi flag, are you sure that this photo is from 1937? Because this photo could be from before or pre-47. 37. I noticed that the Library of Congress did not have precise dates, so it could have been pre-37. Okay. Firstly, this was the meeting of the Nazi Party in Palestine, and it's interesting to see that all the members of the party were Germans. These were part of the German community and other foreigners, Europeans, living in Palestine. And this meeting took place in Fast Hotel, which was owned by a German man. And everyone who attended was from the German colonialist community in the city and or the country. It is very important to note that the Nazi party did not flourish in Palestine, despite what was said about big alliances with the Nazis. There was one a Palestinian commander, which felt empathy. Will Biffle talked about Hajj Amin al-Husseini being an ally of Nazis, but Amin al-Husseini did not associate totally. They call that guy Giffen. They call him the parachute. So it is very important to note that despite all the bad atrocities by the Zionists, there was no empathy with the Nazis among Palestinians. Also, you pointed out that the American colony owners bought or lived in key areas for messianic waiting. However, there are some differences between the Jews and the Christians regarding the return of Christ. You see the tombs of the Jews in the lower level of Mount of Olives, but for Christians, the most important is the Mount Zion next to Jaffa Gate, and that's because the Last Supper took place next to the tomb of David, King David. And so the Christians are waiting for Messiah next to the rail, and the Jews are waiting next to the olives. But the Israelis changed the place, she said. Also, some Jews say that it is next to Lion's Gate. But the question is, why do Muslims bury their dead next to the Lion's Gate? Does that have to do with the Jewish vision or not? Because it's close to where the Jews say their Messiah will come. Okay, thanks a lot, Dr. Rossum. This Renaissance idea or redemptive messianic thought is excellent to kind of see this whole thing within the specific spiritual specificity of Jerusalem in eschatology. But my question is, are there written texts on this subject, or are they just interpretations or popular stories from certain people from certain periods of time? So after looking into this subject, I hope that there would be studies that show us about this. Second question, Jack, thanks a lot for your lecture. Today, there are many studies that try to document and read the photos and transformations in landscapes and villages in certain periods. I would hope if we know that Jerusalem has specific things, but what was the specificity of Jerusalem in that case? Are there some criticisms of this work? Salim, as a person who is quite knowledgeable about Ramallah and Al-Bira since 1985 regarding this subject, what is the difference between what is happening between Ramallah and Al-Bira with what's happening between Nazareth and Rene, or between other conflicting or rivaling towns? Is it part of a societal phenomenon that is taking place in general, or is it just a normal thing? Is it a unique thing, or is it a normal thing among neighbors? One last point. I would wish that we would start our lecture by not putting any future determinants based on coercion. It seems as if we looking at sea areas as sacred areas. No, they are not sacred. In 1985 and 97 and other years when they were talking about planning considerations, there were mainly real estate considerations. There were no sea areas or whatever areas. But later, they specified the areas for the sewage and so on in Jerusalem. There were many problems. Is this a social phenomenon among different people, different municipalities, and different elites, or is it a social case? And also with regard to preserving the nature of the city, and where there were elites from different denominations or parties, when they were talking about thinking about establishing mosques, some people were saying, no, let's not do that to keep the good nature of the country. There were similar rivalries in Nazareth, Jerusalem, and even all over the world elsewhere abroad. So 3 more questions and then the answers. Thanks a lot to the 3 lecturers. I would like to comment on the photos presented by Jack. I really enjoyed these pictures, and especially since on a night-to-night basis I try to collect and present these photos of Jerusalem. I enjoyed these photos. However, I would like to comment the following. Regarding that iron column that you were talking about, that iron was like an indicator for by the police to regulate the traffic movement, and they used to also use some light to light up the street. There was, in one of the pictures, we see the municipality of Jerusalem. In one of the pictures, we see the municipality, and then in 1948, the building was destroyed. Many buildings were destroyed as well, except for Fast Hotel. With regard to the clock tower, I did a great big research on that. This clock tower was not moved to London. I heard this from BBC about 20 or 30 years ago. I don't want to show my age. They said the rumor about moving it to the Big Ben is wrong. However, the factory that made the clock tower and Big Ben was the same company. It's a company called DONT or something like that. The clock tower in Jaffa Gate had 2 timings: the Arab solar time and the British time. Some people say that it was moved to the London Combat Museum, but it is not there. With regard to the one of the other buildings of which was the sisters' school, the Israelis removed that building, and Notre Dame was much wider at the time, but they removed the school in order to expand the road. That's opposite Newgate, yes. Okay, thanks a lot. To Mr. Salim Abu Zahir. And a question to Atkaso. With regard to Haifa and the occupation established a road called Otse, which divided or segregated between the Jewish and the Arab neighborhoods, and it was a basis of racism. So this road segregated the Arab population areas and also between Judah and Samaria. The name of the road is HaChotze or HaChotze. So they divided or segregated through that road between the Arab and Jewish population centers. With regard to the story of Haifa, it seems that in your study segment you chose a certain population. Although if you made a strategic plan and sat with the general population in Haifa, it would have been better to understand better the resistance element in Haifa. So from the general population, Salim, one of the German writers, wrote a book about Ramallah. And he explained Ramallah as a vacant, empty place. He said there are 230 empty apartments that are empty, or 25,000 empty apartments or what have you in Bira. We talk a lot about the differences between Ramallah and Bira, but all the populations or segments of Palestinian society are present in Ramallah today and Al Bira, so it's quite diverse today as a result of that, moving in and so on. Thanks a lot. A few quick comments. Since I'm from Haifa, I'm originally from Galilee, but I lived in Haifa for a long time. With regard to the paper about Haifa, the Wadi Salib issue was not mentioned. Okay, she's asking her to raise her voice. So we know that Haifa is passing through an immense gentrification in the recent years, including in Wadi Salib and Wadi Nisnas. There is also another issue that's important to talk about in light of the fake coexistence. It is important to talk about the holiday season that starts in December and extends for 1 month. Then we would see the whole daily inspection on people in Wadi Nisnas. They do a lot of harassment to people. So, and what's even more important to talk about, and I think you should have, at Kaso, you mentioned that resistance and artistic culture and so on have to do with the elite more. So maybe your research paper as a student, university student, we see that because of its geographic location in Haifa, Haifa has underwent ethnic cleansing. University of Haifa has 40% Arab students, and that affects the city. There are many students who move to live in Haifa permanently after finishing the subject, their studies. There is also the Abna al-Balad movement, and they are independent. This was not talked about, this movement, Abna al-Balad. They are like a bridge in Haifa. They were not mentioned by you as if they are marginalized. So these should have been included. We have a coffee break now. You can talk together separately. Thanks a lot. I'm sorry, I need to open pave the way for the answers to the comments and questions so that the speakers would speak, except if they allow me to extend, but I won't be able to do that. So we have 10 minutes to answer the different, except if you want to cancel the break, the coffee break, but some people want to smoke. All right. What we can suggest is that if people want to take a break, they can go. If you really want to extend this, people who want to take a coffee break, they can go out, and we can pursue and continue. Oh, you want us to finish earlier? Okay, no problem. Earlier. I am the chair, and I say that after the end of the session, I will take another round for those who want to keep sitting. As for the people who want to take a 15-minute break, then it's fine. For your benefit. So we have 2 minutes to answer the first round of questions. شكرا جزيلا على ملاحظاتكم. أنا أعتذر كثيرا على طبيعة أن عرضي لم يكن يعني أروع عرض ممكن. لا لم يكن سيئا تقول لها السيدة غادة المذبوح. لا إذا أنا أدعوكم بأن تقرأوا ورقتي البحثية، هي مبنية على ما رأيته فيها. فأنا أعتذر كثيرا على أني لم أغطي كافة المواضيع، هي موجودة في الأوراق فيما يتعلق بتركيزي على النخبة. هذا صحيح، ولكن عندما تحدثت عن أعمال المقاومة اليومية في حيفا، أنا لا أعتقد أن ذلك ينطبق فقط على النخبة، وأرى أن هناك محاولات بين الناس بأن يحاربوا عصابات المخدرات وغير ذلك. هناك الكثير من الأمور التي لم أذكرها في محاضرتي، ولكن طبعا هناك مشكلة مستمرة.
Whereby this elite cultural resistance is just for the elite, and it's just to have concerts in Fatouche, and it's not getting, they are not conveying the message to the rest of the Palestinians and to the rest of the villagers. Because one thing I didn't mention is that a friend of mine calls Haifa, maybe he's wrong, the city of 1 million Arabs, because all of the people in the Galilee and in the triangle travel or live in Haifa for education, for leisure, for entertainment. And this is resistance for me, in terms, and this is the right to build a public sphere and to have a Palestinian city. And I don't believe we can define elite in terms of education and in terms of whether you go to shopping malls, but I don't think resistance in Haifa is just elite-centered. And it's true that there's always an elitist component when it comes to resistance, in terms of counter-hegemony and in terms of political meetings, in terms of civil society. But I didn't want to make that mistake, and I will review the whole paper. And again, apologies to the Haifawis.
Minutes, if you may. Okay, I will try to do that. With regard to that iron column that Ghada talked about. About the division and so on. I have some work coming up about this, about the division, denominational, and what have you. In the ends of the Ottoman era, some Bire say that the carpet was pulled out from the Bire, in which there was a military group that used to solve the problems between Qais and Yemen, and Ramallah became a municipality in the beginning of the 20th century and became a center. With regard to the tale of two cities or tale of two municipalities, with regard to that question, there are three main levels or organizations that we need to look at when we talk about this: the municipality, library, and the people. It is true that the municipality has a great role, and usually the elite are the ones who produce such things. So I would like to quote this speaker about the horizontal or vertical relationship. It is actually a mix between the two and a combination of different societal structures in the city. For example, some of the parties, when they take place in Ramallah, the people of Bire refuse that they take place in Bire. But you see the people from Bire going to party in Ramallah. So the people of Bire have become part of this, boundaryless kind of behavior that they do not want to have in El Bire, but they practice this behavior, parties and so on, having fun in Ramallah, not in Bire. So they refuse to do that in Bire. Now the elections protocol that Dr. Salim Tamari talked about, that according to customs, the mayor of Ramallah should be a Christian. In El Bire, when there are elections lists, the mayor should be from El Bire. So the candidates, 5 or 6, are from Bire. Now we see how they consider the family influence much more holy or sacred than in Ramallah. So the middle class in Ramallah is no longer considered comprised of the original Ramallans or Ramallites, but they are composed of people from different backgrounds and not necessarily Ramallah. And this is not the case in El Bire. Also, there are, of course, some traditions and habits, interests, and other things that are present in El Bire. There is no doubt that the family has a great influence in the municipality of El Bire. Most of the influential jobs, if you may, are occupied by Bire people. For example, one of the mayors of Bire considers Bire like a thorough country. I do not want to feed denominationalism or separation between the people, but this is true. This is the truth. Last point, with regard to the lack of extension of sea areas, why did Ramallah expand at the expense of Betunia, Rihan, and so on? However, Bire and Betin did not see this. Why didn't Bire swallow Betin like Ramallah swallowed Rihan from Abu Kasr and swallowed Betunia? So if we... I think that if the real estate contractors had the chance to expand to sea areas, we would see Bire expanding. But today we do not have real sovereignty over our lands. So the master plan in the municipality of El Bire is not being implemented until today. Exactly. And that is totally different from what is happening on the ground. Master plans are different than what's happening on the ground. If we can tell real estate brokers to start being encouraged to invest in sea areas, then that might be good. Thanks a lot. If someone wants to have a break, they can have. Go ahead. Okay, it's good that not many questions were posed to me. Dr. Rasim, the source or reference that I saw was Karen Armstrong in her book, Jerusalem, One City, Three Faiths. In that book, Karen talks or enhances and confirms this point. You can get the book. It is very valuable, and the references are quite enhanced. There are many great things about the history of Jerusalem. It is one of the best books written on Jerusalem. But I didn't understand your second question. Is there a reading of some of the events? But I didn't really understand your question, honestly. I cannot hear the speaker because he's not using a microphone. What was specific to Jerusalem? This distinctive thing in Jerusalem, the unique thing, in Jerusalem was that Jerusalem is a symbolic national and national symbol, religious and national symbol. Even the Zionist state was established on this pillar, and unfortunately, we also started rotating around this symbol, and we actually, as if removed the content from it. Jerusalem site of resistance. Yes, it's possible, of course, but unfortunately, we dragged ourselves too much in the religious warfare, holy war in a way, or holy struggle. They designed that for us, and we fell in the trap. It seems like today we have different outbursts on the basis of Al-Aqsa or Holy Sepulchre and so on. It seems like the focus isn't on our patriotism, but is rather on the religion. Thanks a lot to everyone. We have officially finished this session. If someone would like to take a break, please go ahead. And if someone would like to stay, then you can pose questions. But please give us 3 minutes or 1 minute, just to help people leave the room. Go ahead.